future. JavaScript is a different ballgame.
Yeah. JavaScript, we're going to be focusing on getting more into throughout the rest of the course, whereas Bootstrap is going to be something more in like more in the background. You're going to be utilizing it though to create your applications from now on, so you guys should get good at it. But it's fairly easy to actually be an expert in Bootstrap within maybe like a week. Any questions though before I start going into JavaScript about anything else? Okay. So have you guys, how many of you guys started pair programming? You guys can just put it in the chat. Okay. So it seems like everyone is starting to get into it. Good question. So what do we pair program on? So I would suggest starting with something simple, an in-class exercise that was important but not too long. So maybe one of the ones about functions or something like that. And yeah, you can pair program on homeworks. Just let us know and that you did that, and that's perfectly okay. I would start off by doing smaller exercises and then going into bigger problems. It's usually good for solving larger problems, but I want you guys to get used to each other. The reason I want to do pair programming, or want you guys to do pair programming, is first, I want you guys to really get to know each other. You guys are going to lean on each other a lot as the program progresses. Have you guys seen those videos that I sent from graduates? I think it was from the UT program. I posted, I don't know where the hell I posted it. Somewhere? Instruct? No. Yes, instructor resources. So check those out. And those are by some of the graduates from the UT Austin, I think UT Houston, maybe the Rutgers University program. It's all the same program. It's a centralized curriculum across universities. So make sure you guys take advantage of those, different pieces of advice. And these are all like graduates that have gotten programming jobs as well. So I think pair programming will help you start your first projects because one of the biggest hurdles that we run into is grouping people into projects that don't get along well with each other. It is important to learn how to get along well with each other if you don't like each other, but because the program is short, we want to take advantage of being able to have good project groups in the get-go. I want you guys to try and put yourselves into groups first by doing this pair programming. Two main factors. One, you guys are on the same skill level. It shouldn't be asymmetric. It shouldn't be like, one person's like really like, like Zuckerbergish, and the other one's like, how do I identify this potato? And so it really is important to get like a good match on that level. So one person's not doing all the work. Another thing to mention is personality. So, it doesn't mean that you guys have to have the same personality, but you guys should get along well when programming. Like, when someone's being the driver, one person's being the passenger isn't being like a backseat driver the whole time, and vice versa. And that you guys, mesh well and can do things together and solve problems together well. So these are two things I want you guys to really start doing, and it is really important. And also, this will help you start building connections with each other. So you guys can start building a network, and start having fun in the program. Even though it's a lot of suffering, there is shared suffering that can make things a lot better. So if you hang out with each other, grab drinks, like code together at like a bar or something. I don't even know. There's a lot of like good stories that can come out of it. A lot of friends have been made, friendships, relationships, all kinds of things have been made. It's not like MTV Real World. You shouldn't bring like any drama inside the classroom, but definitely I've seen like only positive things coming out of people working together more and going through this program. And then some have joined like softball teams together, going to Vegas, getting drunk together, having a blast. Now they all like like a lot of people just like hang out together like every day and stuff. It's kind of crazy. So I really encourage that. Any questions about the pair programming parts, benefits? We're all good? Okay. So let's get started with JavaScript. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to work on the rock, paper, scissors one. And I'm going to share my screen. So rock, paper, scissors was about creating your first real algorithm to solve a problem. And it was a little complex, right? I think a lot of people had trouble with this, and it makes sense. It's difficult. It's not easy, and it wasn't meant to be easy. There's a lot of new concepts that were introduced very quickly, such as event listeners. We had if everyone else can put themselves on mute just until the end of this, or when I ask you guys to take yourselves off mute. That way there's no like random dogs barking or shit like that. So there you go. So Ian, I put you on mute because you weren't. There we go. All right. So the logic of this game was to create, or the problem that you were trying to solve was, I have to build a game programmatic that replicates, and someone else is off mute. It's really easy to go on mute. Let's see who's not. No, everyone's on mute. I don't know what that was. All right. So basically, take this concept of a rock, paper, scissors game. You guys did the rock, paper, scissors, and make it programmatic, right? So the first thing what we did, actually, so I'm gonna ask you guys, what was the first thing that we did? And you can put it into chat. Where the hell is the chat? There we go. So first thing we did was play rock, paper, scissors. So after that, in terms of going into code, yes. So the answer is, first we determined what problem to solve, and then we started doing some pseudocode, right? So Suha is right as well, which is figuring out what rules to code. And figuring that out has to do with Michael mentioned as well, which is pseudocoding, right? So pseudocoding is really important. What I'm going to do is comment all of this out. And let's just do the final result and comment everything out and just take it one step at a time. So if we pseudocode, the first thing we do is we say, okay, how do I solve this problem, and what steps are needed in order for me to accomplish to find a solution to this problem? So we've identified the problem. The problem is that I need to be able to create a game that allows a user to be able to input a rock, paper, or scissors as a choice. The computer will then respond with the choice, and then the result will either be rock, or sorry, not rock, paper, scissors, but wins, losses, or ties. I also want the ability to track that, and I want there to be input via, something, maybe keys. Keys is just one way of solving this, right? You could have done it in a way where you type in A, B, C, whatever it is, and then click a button, and that could be another way to solve it. You could have had preset buttons already, and you just click on the right one. There's a lot of different ways to solve it. We just decided to go with typing in R, P, or S, representing rock, paper, scissors, respectively. Any questions up to this point? Give you guys a few seconds. OP? Okay. So once we have our thought process down about what the problem is about, and again, this is a much simpler problem than like other problems are going to be, where like Hangman is going to be the next natural progression of a game that has you solve a more complex algorithm, and that's going to involve a lot more steps, right? So the next part is actually pseudocoding that, and pseudocoding is just a fancy way of saying type in the steps that occur in order for me to solve these problems. So notice that we started writing some of them out, right? So we started saying, okay, in my head, and again, like a lot of you guys are going to be like, I don't even know how to start pseudocoding. It's like, it's fine. Just write down what you think are steps to a solution at different intervals of your application or the problem that you're trying to solve. So it's the same thing applies to any part of engineering, right? You break down a larger problem into smaller steps and be able to solve those at each point, cumulatively coming together with a solution. So you have a rock, paper, scissors game, and the first thing we said is, okay, creates an array that lists out all the options, rock, paper, or scissors. And we said, okay, that's good, but I'm going to add one more step. I'm going to say have output for rock, paper, scissors for user instructions. And we're going to take it even fully. The question is, do we finish the full pseudocode before we code? I generally do. I generally pseudocode because I don't, when I start pseudocoding parts out, and this is a good question, I start thinking about the logic and how it works with different parts. So I start with the top part, right, from the top bottom, and I say, okay, the first thing I need is this, and then come up with some kind of pseudocoded solution. And the pseudocode is, it might not seem technical, but you're actually thinking through the programmatic logic as well. So you're going to be researching, you're going to be looking at different solutions, and you're going to be like, okay, this is a possible solution. Based on that, assuming this works, we can go on to the next step and do some pseudocoding there. Okay, and then this, and then this, and this. And so you actually start building out your application in a way. And this is actually going to take probably a lot longer than the programming itself. For me, the pseudocoding now, after working on it for years on programming, is a lot longer than me actually programming, because now it's just like the syntax. Yes, so it is essentially just brainstorming, researching, thinking, and this is so much easier if you guys are pair programming. So one person is the driver, is typing, the other person is analyzing it, and they're saying, oh, okay, what if you did this? Like, what about this? How about this way of doing things? So that really will help out. If I have the output for R, P, and S for user instructions, where do I already see that in my application so far? So line 16, where's line 16 represented in the application at this point? Where's the implementation of that? Yes, and just type it on the text. Correct. Line 12. So lines 11 through 12 specifically because it's within the div and everything is within that. And you might be thinking, it's like, well, there's no real difference, right? It's like the same thing. But this is actually our game container. And so we decided to put everything within a certain container. Everything else is not related to the game except what's in here. So you guys are correct. So I started off with that. And you know, later on, as you guys get better programming, you can make it less specific. Like, you know, you're going to be like, oh, of course there's going to be an output. Or of course it's going to be this, blah, blah, blah. In the beginning, I want you guys to be very explicit about what you're going to do. So we have that put. So what I'm going to do is put this over here. And notice that it's not commented. Why is that not commented out? HTML, yes. So let's comment it on HTML. There we go. Oh, don't want to comment that one out. There we go. All right, so you can make comments in HTML as well. All right, so next part is I want to, let's see. And this is kind of all over the place. So they started off with different functions. What I'm going to do, yeah, actually, no, this is fair. Okay. I'm actually going to put it into steps. So it makes it easier. So this was step 1. Step 2, what I'm going to do is get user input. Let's just keep it simple. And I'm going to come up with a solution for getting the user input. So different ways of getting user input, right? There are, you know, I mentioned button clicking, I mentioned like key press, I mentioned all these different things. But we were already given one to do. And that was using the event listener from document.onKeyUp, right? So why don't we just use that? So get user input using, and let me just move this around so you guys can see it. Like this. Okay. So get user input, let's see, using key press. Store info in variable for later use. So right now you guys are going to be a lot more explicit. Later on, again, you guys can be more broad. But now you can start like visualizing what's going to happen, right? So if you thought about a solution, that means you probably have a programmatic solution in mind as well. And again, it's going to be difficult because like right now it's like, well, how do I come up with that solution to begin with? It's like, so this is, you know, for me, it's like, okay, I know how to do this based on previous knowledge. You guys are going to start coming up with, okay, the problem at this point is going to be getting how to get user input. And then the solution in this case would be this. So breaking the problem down to different parts makes it easy. I noticed that commenting in the script tab uses JS-style commenting instead of HTML. Yes, that is because, so David is correct. So the reason is because we are within JavaScript here, so it automatically recognizes that we are inside JavaScript. So how to get user input, right? So we came up with a solution. We said, okay, we're just going to use document.onKeyUp. So to do that, we did something like this, and I think I already have the solution up here. So we're just going to take this. And we're going to keep this comment. This function is run whenever the user presses a key. And this is just for notes for any other user coming in. So document.onKeyUp is saying, every time a user does a press on the keyboard and lets go, this is tracking that. This function will execute. So why don't we close this out too? So we say, this is what's happening. All right, so we know how to get user input. So we said get user input and then using key press and store info in variable for later use. And again, that's going from understanding what the application is going to do. So you have to think about it a little bit more broad now. You're thinking, okay, I have this information. Now I need to use it later. Therefore, I need to put it into a variable. So what I'm going to do is say var, input key equals, and I'm going to say event dot key. And I think it's already here somewhere. Actually, user guess is a better variable. I'm going to use that. I think that better represents the data going in. So let's just use that. Okay, so now we have a variable user guess, and it's referencing this event.key. This event object, again, it's passed to you implicitly whenever you perform an event that has an event listener. So this is the event listener. You perform that event, so you have that event being passed to you. So it's like, okay, now if you want to access what part of the event was done, now you said, okay, it was a keystroke, so I want to get the key that was pushed. So inside this event function, so inside of this function, and we know what functions do, we're able to say, okay, user guess is going to be the event key that was pressed and let go. So now we have number 2 solved. Any questions so far? So the question is storing information for later use, and that's a good question. It's like, why, what is this storing information? So what I mean is, as the application is running, JavaScript will hold all information within variables as long as that application is running. Event is not a method. Event is an object passed in. But it's passed in implicitly, meaning that whenever you do this on key up, assume that you always get the event passed to you. So the user guess, so this variable, every time I want to store and use this information, I could just write event.key, but I generally want to store it in a variable because it makes it easy for me to be like, okay, what was that thing that I was storing? Oh, okay, it's in this variable. So it lets you know what data you're going to be working with and what data you want to use throughout your application as the application is running. So later on, we might use this user guess against other stuff, so we store it into a variable. Does that make sense? Excellent. Yes, key is a property of the object event, correct. That is absolutely correct. So now you guys are starting to see like, oh, hey, this is an object. Oh, this is a property. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so now we have the user, right? So we understand it from like a larger perspective. We say we have the user, and the user is able to input something, and we're able to get that information. Excellent. Now, what do I do with that information afterwards? So you might say, okay, well, after this, I want to be able to go to the next step, which is getting the computer choice, right? So let's see, let's put this as a problem. Choice from a computer. Maybe thinking it's like, okay, how do I get this choice from a computer? So one solution, if you think about it, could be, okay, there's only 3 choices, R, P, or S. And in the homework or in the assignment, we gave you the ability to randomly choose from an array using math.random. So based on that, you can probably think of a data structure that can hold 3 different values. Now you could use an object because we are now using objects, but arrays are a good way of doing this because we don't need to associate key value pairs. We just need the index of the elements. So why don't we do this? We say create an array that lists out all the options and then choose or randomly choose an element or a choice from this array. All right. So again, this part would require research and a lot of critical thinking, right? Research and critical thinking are going to go into this. Programming is not easy, but it's really satisfying. So once you figured out the solution to, again, this small part of the problem, a small part of the problem, as opposed to trying to solve the whole thing at once, it makes it a lot easier. Because then you can just say, oh, okay, well, I just need to look up how to create an array. So why don't we just create an array? So we create this array, and it's var computer choices. And you might be thinking, it's like, okay, wait. So we have this document on key up, and we have this variable array down here. Like, how are they going to get attached to each other? And it's like, don't worry about that for right now. Let's first just think about how to get the computer choice, and we'll worry about that a little bit later. All right, so these are different options that we have, right? And these were chosen based on a user typing in a lowercase r, p, or s. And we just want to assume that these are the only choices. So that's what we decided to go with, r, p, or s. Now we also have the ability to say, oh, okay, well, randomly choose from this. And we already gave this to you guys, so this should have been given to you. It's a little confusing to look at, but if you analyze it and you research it, what's happening here is we're using this global math object. This math object exists in JavaScript. Random is a method on this object, and what it does is it gives you a random number between 0 and 1. You might be thinking, it's like, what? So like 0.5 or 0.1? It'll actually give you a near infinite amount of decimal places between 0 and 1. So if I just did math.random, it could give me any number. I'm not sure what the default is. I don't remember, but if I set this, if I set it randomly, it can give me any number. Instead, what I want is I want this number between 0 and 1 to be between the length of 0 and let's see, 0, 1, 2. So 0 and 2. And so we use the computer choices dot length, and the length of this array is what? So in the chat, put down what you think the length of the array is. Exactly, it's 3. And so you might be thinking, it's like, wait, so how does it get 0 and 3? So this is where the math.floor comes into place. So this will round down to the lowest number. So what happens is it will give you a choice, again, between 0 and 1, but we multiplied it by computer choices dot length, and then we rounded down. So it's going to give you between 0 and 2. So if it's 2.99999, whatever it is, it's just going to go down to 2. So that enables us to get between 0, 1, and 2 as a computer choice. And all this is going to go down to is array indexing with either 0 1, or 2. And it's a simple formula that you can just memorize, or just not even memorize, just reference whenever you need it. You can look up why we use math.floor versus math.ceil. And again, it just boils down to us not wanting to get the off chance of the highest number. We want to get the lowest, meaning 0. And so we definitely want 0 to be a number that we get. And computer choices is just this array over here that we created. So our guess is going to result in what of 3 choices? And again, the question is, our computer guess is going to result in what of 3 choices? Correct. TJ being lazy. R, P, or S. Excellent. So if we get R, P, or S, then we have player 2, right? And we've already got the result from user. So we have player 1's answer and player 2's answer. So now that we have these 2 choices, we can have them work together. You might think it's like, wait, this is kind of confusing because we started working with function scope. So the order of this stuff doesn't really make any sense, right? How is this user guess going to work with this computer choice? And this computer choice was defined afterwards. So think about that for a second. We want to compare 2 guesses, user guess against computer guess. But there's 2 issues. One is, yes, okay, normally computer guess would be able to be accessed by function because it's in a global scope and this is in a local scope. So anything in here has access to anything in here, but not anymore because these were declared afterwards, right? So what do we have to do in order for us to use this computer guess inside of here? You guys can think about it and then put it into the chat. I'm just gonna get some water. And you guys can feel free to unmute yourselves and start talking to each other too. Maybe discuss some stuff. Okay, so it seems like you guys all came to the same conclusion. And that is correct. That is a correct answer. So it makes sense from a user perspective too, right? What's happening is we can just put all of this in here. Wait, let's put all of this stuff in here. Could you declare user guess? Yes, you could. Yes. The question is, could you make this global by declaring it outside? Absolutely. But generally, you want to keep things as local as possible to prevent namespace creep, meaning that you don't want other things to access this information unless it's absolutely necessary. And that's a security and validation issue that you guys are going to see later on as you guys work with more data. And you will be working with a lot more data. Okay. So what we're going to do next is we have this computer choice and we have a user guess. So what's our next logical step? Ian, what are you doing? Like Spider-Man. So what's our next step here? It's like crawling on a building. You are muted. It just looks like you're crawling on a building. Correct. Yes. Yes. So you compare these choices against each other, right? So I would say, okay, I have user guess and I have computer guess, and compare these guesses against one another. So I'm going to say, okay, compare guesses against one another and see, let's see, compare against each other and determine result. So this is a problem. Solution would be, and again, I'm just doing this like very in a very verbose way right now because it's just going to be taking you very much step by step. You guys don't have to go like this in depth. You guys can just have like a single line that says like this is what I'm going to do. But I just want to take you guys step by step. So the solution would be, let's think of a solution. So if I want to compare against each other, how do I compare things? If. Yeah, so let's use a conditional statement. Using conditional or use conditional statements in order to determine the result. And that makes sense, right? So we use comparison operators to compare things. Look at that. Programming words being useful. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take these because it makes it a lot easier. And I'm not going to really go through the logic of if-else statements because I think that's something that you guys have understood, if I'm not incorrect. But we'll take it, we'll do a little bit of it. So we're going to say if user guess is equal to R, or user guess is equal to P, or user guess is equal to S, then run the following statements. So these are all going to be nested within, let's see, this is all correct. This is all correct, and I need an extra brackets. And what is this doing? This doesn't seem to be comparing anything. I mean, it's doing an equality operator check, but why do I have this? What's this part? Forget everything else. Let's do this part. Yes. So this is to make sure that so this is correct. This is data validation, right? So these conditional statements will only run if the user entered R, P, or S. So I can actually have something that says something like that. Now what happens is, if they didn't enter R, P, or S, it's going to say, please enter a valid input using this crappy alert, right? Normally I'd have like a modal or something like that, but this is fine. So we now know that we're actually saying, okay, only run this following code if the user typed in R, P, or S. No, a numeric value does not need to be given because you can do a comparison against characters. So you don't have to make like a hash map or anything like that. Okay, so now we're going to assume that they did an R, P, or S, right? So if user guess is equal to R and computer guess is equal to S, yes, Mateo, it does. And that's because of the event listener from the browser. The JavaScript engine renders it and says, oh, event.key, we understand what that means. So if user guess is equal to R and computer guess is equal to S, and let's just take everything else out just to not confuse us. We're going to increase the wins by 1. And you might be thinking, it's like, well, what is this wins plus plus? Why did I put that there? Well, I want to start tracking not only guesses, now it goes into the next problem, right? The next problem is once the condition is met, do something with the result, right? So we have this result of, if, R versus S. So if user guesses rock and the computer guesses scissors, who wins? Correct. The user, right? Rock. So Jenna asked, who's the wins plus plus connected to, user or computer? That's a good question. So we're automatically going to assume that the user understands that they won because they're the ones inputting. We're not going to assume that they're the computer. So if there's multiple players, meaning that they're both users, and you guys are going to have a bonus homework exercise that does that. If using Firebase, create a multiplayer browser-based rock, paper, scissors game, which is actually a really difficult one. Then you're going to be able to say, okay, winner or player 1 has this many wins and player 2 has this many wins. So you're going to have 2 separate ones. But in this case, it's just going to be as simple as wins, losses, and ties for the user. So then what I'm going to do over here is say solution, store the wins, or store the results in a counter or in counter variables. And this is just from us, again, doing research and thinking critically and saying like, okay, so I should probably have variables that track these things. Now, you might be thinking, it's like, okay, but if I need to track wins, and what does wins plus plus do, by the way? What does that assume? So first, what does it assume, and then what does it do? What does wins plus plus assume? What data type does it assume for wins? Wins is a number and you're adding 1 to it. Correct. And it's the user's score. Excellent. So with that information in mind, you might be thinking, it's like, okay, so it's going to track the wins. But we're inside of a function. So all this information will disappear as soon as a user types in another R, P, or S, or any other key, actually. So then how could we maintain wins in order to last a lot longer? And TJ is correct. Wins needs to be global, right? And we don't just need wins. What else do we need? Losses and ties. Excellent. So what we're going to do is we're going to go up here and we're going to go and type in var wins. And again, we're assuming it's a number, right? So we can't just declare it. We have to initialize it with an integer because we want to increment on it. So we're going to do that. And here's a shortcut. Instead of having to write var multiple times, just do ties equals 0, comma, losses equals 0, and now we end the statement. So you don't have to write var over and over. It just makes it cleaner looking. It's the same thing. It's basically saying var wins, var ties, var losses. If we didn't initialize it with 0, I don't even know what it assumes it as. I think it assumes it as undefined. No, sorry, no, it's not undefined because it is defined as a variable. It doesn't know what to do with it. I think it might automatically, depending on the browser, do a type conversion. But bad practice. And I think if you use strict, then it'll run into weird issues. Okay, so we have wins, losses, and ties. So now we have the ability to start doing stuff with it. And now we can just go through all of these, right? So if they choose this, if they choose that, if they choose this, then it's like, you know, it'll be a win, a loss, or tie, or blah, 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 right? Now, we have these results, and we're just going to get rid of these. So actually, our game is almost complete, right? But is there information being displayed anywhere? Yet. So what we want to do is we've actually done the basics of any computer program except the last part. So we've done input, which is getting input from the user. We've done processing. So processing is processing all this information. Now we need the final part, which is output, right? So input IO, so IO, and you might see something like this. That just means input output, right? So now we want an output that displays the result. So why don't we have something that says display results? So if I have something like that, let me think about this. I want to put this. Yeah, I could do it at the end. That's fine. Okay. So this is going to be a little bit confusing, but it makes sense. And this is a really crappy way of doing it. We're going to show you a better way of doing it later. I really hate the way of doing this. It's so ugly. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to utilize what we had over here in game, and we're going to replace everything inside of game with our results. So before it said press R, P, or S. to start playing. So what we want to do is, now our next problem is display results to the browser. That's our problem. And solution. So how to do that? Create a variable to store a string. Interpolate, sounds confusing. Let me use a better, easier term. What's the synonym for that? Interspersed. Spurs. Can I spell? Spurs. Interspersed. Somebody correct me. I don't know how to spell interspersed. With data from results of game. Display the data using a query selector. So again, this is just going to be us doing a lot of critical thinking, coming up with a solution. But notice that because we broke it down to so many different parts, it becomes so much easier to just research each part at a time, right? So now I have this smaller problem to work with, and I'm like, oh, okay, I know how to display information. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a variable to hold our new HTML. So we're just going to call it HTML as a variable. And it's going to be a huge string, right? So what we're going to do is you can actually put in HTML directly as part of a string and input it into the DOM using what's called the query selector. So what I'm going to do is say you chose and then put user guess. And then I'm going to end that tag. And then I'm going to put the computer chose computer guess. And then the wins are the wins. And the losses are the losses. And the ties are going to be the ties, right? So all this is one giant string. All right, so take a look at that. I want you guys to just look at it and then ask some questions if you guys have any questions. The plus are concatenation symbols that represent if you're using strings, they combine strings together. Concatenation is just a fancy word for smash two strings together to combine them. In this case, the variables actually represent information. It will just do a type conversion if they are numbers to strings. As far as creating the HTML on JS, would that hinder you in terms of styling or creating a responsive layout? It would not. It's just really ugly and unmanageable. So later on, we're going to get into React, and it'll help with some of this stuff. Probably. Yeah, there is a lot of jargon, but there is a reason. Again, it was developed by engineers, so it's not just like random obscure terms. Usually the terms are developed for a purpose, like creating, like conditional statements and those kind of terms. They're meant to explain it better. Sometimes, though, people are just, when they name shit, stupid. Okay, so at this point, we have a single string with all the information put into it. Now we need to input this information into the DOM, right? So this is going to be the DOM over here. That's going to get, after it gets interpolated, after I put stuff inside of it. So let me use this. If I use fancy words you guys don't understand, just let me know. I kind of just get used to it, and then I forget that it's like I had the same issues where it's like, you know, getting used to jargon and stuff. So I'll forget. Okay, so what we're going to do next is we're going to set the inner HTML. And the inner HTML just means the HTML within the element of our game div. So all we're doing is saying, okay, use this query selector. Query selector is very similar to get element by ID. So we could have just done this, and it's the same thing. A query selector just allows you to select anything and pass it anything in. Whatever selector, element selector, ID selector, whatever, class selector. So this is an ID. I'm just going to use get element by ID, which you guys have used already. And so this is going to find, find the element in the document that has this ID, game. Oh, here it is. Okay. Now, inside, instead of using, remember we had text content to replace the content inside of, in between the two tags? You guys remember that? Yeah, okay. So instead what we're doing is replacing everything inside of the HTML. So it's very similar, but instead of replacing just the content, we replace it with HTML. And what that does is allows us to put in HTML directly in there. So what we're doing is saying, give it this following HTML. So replace it with this. And that allows us to put in HTML. You could actually just put text in here and it would have worked the same. But it's meant to say like, okay, replace whatever was inside this div, or whatever this element is, with the following HTML. And so this is a string, but it's going to render it as HTML. Therefore, if I run this, and watch, it's not going to work. I probably made some stupid mistake. Okay. If I do R, okay, it is working. P, S, R, P, S, R, P, S, R, P, we have a working application. Pretty cool, eh? All right, so now I'm just going to open it up to questions. So it's been about an hour. I've been talking a lot, and I want to hear from you guys. So you guys can all unmute yourselves. Here, I'll unmute people so you guys don't get shy.
Can you show us the section again of the code, like the scoreboard processing part?
Sure. And let me just unmute people, because I want everyone to participate in this now. Oh yeah, I can share a copy of the session, definitely. I'm recording it right now. So you wanted this output section, is that correct?
Or the part where it's like processing that this is the name and this is a loss.
Sorry, can you say one of them?
So I was a little bit confused about what part of the code is the one that's like dictating to the system, like this is a loss, and then tally this as a loss. Like
okay, this is the part right here. That's a good question. Okay, so here's the part where it's saying, okay, this is a loss if the user gets R and the computer gets P. So if at any point, remember, so this goes into the logic of the rock, paper, scissors game. If I chose rock and they chose something that beats rock, then I'm going to increase my losses. I'm also going to get a loss if I chose scissors and they chose rock. Another time I can get a loss is if I chose P and they chose S.
So it's this part is basically going over like all of the instances in which people can get a loss and a win and a tie.
Yes, correct.
Okay. And then the scoreboard portion of this code that it's going to tally is the output, right?
Yes. So this is the output right over here.
Okay.
All right. So query selector is like the method to select elements on the DOM. It's like for any element, yeah. And so if we want to utilize mouse functionality, do you have to make a new function or can we manipulate the older function to create? So yeah, you'd have to have another selector. So you'd have to say document dot, mouse scroll or something. So any other questions on JavaScript or object functions, anything like that? Was helpful, unhelpful? Anything I could cover that would be in a different way? What is your guys' feedback? And again, I totally appreciate honest feedback because I really just want to help you guys get better as becoming developers. Okay, so you guys want more of the step-by-step explanation of logic. Okay, I'm going to try doing more of that in class then. See if I can do that. I think that would help you guys. I also want to make sure that you guys do exercises in class, so I'll try and mix it up with doing a step-by-step with pseudocode and explain the steps, and then also have you guys take time to do some work on the concepts as well. I know we go really, really, really fast, but that's like, the boot camp aspect of it. But I'm hoping like if we continue doing it this way, it'll help out. What is get element by? So get element by ID is a document selector. What that does is it allows you to find something inside of your document with the following ID called game. So I'm going to look for this element called that has an ID of game. And we find this. This div has an ID of game. There we go. And you guys can talk now, by the way. You guys can ask me questions like out loud.
I'm a little bit confused about I know I already asked the question, but the output part where it says plus wins plus, is that adding a win or?
Yes. Yes. So plus plus is shorthand for, so if I did wins plus plus, this is the same thing as me doing, so wins plus plus is the same thing as me doing wins equals wins plus one.
Okay. And the wins plus plus is at what part of this code?
The wins plus plus is in the part over here. So this is wins plus plus, losses plus plus. So these are the same thing as me doing.
Okay. And then so at the output, there's a portion of the output code that says plus wins plus.
Oh, so this part is not doing a plus plus. These are different. These are concat. One plus on its own is either addition for numbers or increasing, or concatenating strings. So it's not for increasing anything.
So what is this doing? Like, why do we need it?
So think about what this is happening. So I want you to think about this a little bit, and then I'm going to start answering the other question. So what are wins, losses, and ties? Wins and losses and ties are how you're tracking who's winning, or how many wins you have, how many losses you have, and how many ties you have inside of your game. So inside of Hangman, or inside of whatever game you're using, if I want to track winning, how many wins I had every time I played the game, this is what I use for that. A variable is going to reference whatever information I have or whatever expression on the right-hand side into my variable on the left-hand side. A string is a data type that is just a bunch of characters smashed together. So any character. So instance, if I write blah, 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 that's a string. A function can be used for a couple of things. It could be used to just store a block of code to be used. In this case, this is just saying, okay, this is going to be code that I'm going to start using soon. So run the following code. Or it can be used for input output. In this case, it's using for input and for executing a block of code. I'm glad that it was useful. Take care, Hayden. Ralph, you could still do +2. Is there any way we can avoid the computer pick, same thing back to back? Yes. So Andre was asking if you can avoid that. What you can do is store the new value into an array and check to make, and so basically, oh, sorry, not store it in your array. You can actually remove that element from the array so it doesn't pick it again. Global versus local, yes. So in this case, a function scope, local is anything inside of this function, or sorry, anything that was defined inside of this function does not exist outside of the function. That's what's called function scope. Anything outside of it is global to the function. But if this whole thing was inside of another function, then it would be local to, you know, this function, and then anything outside of it will be global. So essentially, global and local, it makes sense when you're talking about a function scope. So anything inside of this function is does define inside this function, like user guess, does not exist outside of this function. It does. So if I did user guess, it'd be like, what the hell is user guess? It is not like class versus ID in CSS at all. So Suha, I would suggest that you start practicing a lot more JavaScript because it's going to be completely different from CSS. I would recommend starting to just mess around with code inside a free code camp, like start doing 1 or 2 algorithms. For each. So going over what for each does. So for each, if you had an array, let's just say butts. I always forgot the butts. I love butts, meows, friends, or something. I don't know. And then I had this stored. Let's just store it as a variable. So r equals this, and then I did r dot for each. What's going to happen is if I do a function and I say elements, what's actually happening is for each is a method that takes in a function as an argument. And what that means is it's the same thing as here. It's a function that's being passed in. And what it does is on each element that's being passed in, it's going to do something to it inside of the array. So if I do return I don't know, element, let's just do, I don't know, element plus is amazing. You do something to the element, right? Now I console.log r. All right, maybe some people should be on mute. God damn, what is that in the background? Like a robot. Okay, so I'm just gonna take this out. And let's just execute this. So if I run this, what happens is, wait, did I execute it? r.for each function element return element is amazing console.log. It should have manipulated it. Did I do something wrong? Item, let's just do item. It should have done it. Am I missing something? Butts, meows, friends. It's not manipulating it. It's not working the way I wanted it to. What am I missing? r.for each function item return item. Am I getting errors? Right one, RPS 7, make sure I got it right. So it doesn't manipulate the new item or the existing one. It creates a new one. So why don't we do...
Hi, Auntie Kim. Oh, hi, Mama.
Hi.
I think this is going to finish in like 10. What time are you finishing?
Okay. So now if I do console.log new R, that should work. God damn it. Why is that not working? New R equals R dot for each. Hold on. Let's go to for each real quick, because that should have worked. It's for each. What am I missing? Scope, solve, scope, question game, my first object, card game solved, for each. No, that's not that one. For each, here we go.
Is it the space before is?
Yeah, a minute. Yeah, I think I just had a weird syntax issue. Let me see. Okay, let me see what I did wrong. Okay, so I have R dot for each. Oh, it takes in a named function? I think that's fine. I should be able to do an anonymous function. Is a decent language. Console.log. So if I do return, it doesn't actually do it. So I don't think it needs a return. Let me see. Let me see here what is happening. Because normally it's supposed to allow me to do a loop that allows me to manipulate each one. And then I'm able to do console.log. R. Let's me ask friends. Yeah, it's not manipulating it. So for each works different than filter. I think I'm thinking of filter or map as higher order functions. So I think I'm getting a couple of functions confused, because normally it allows me, if I use something like .map or .filter, it will take it out. But it seems like this doesn't allow you to do that. So if I do console.log, sorry, just give me a second here. Yeah, that doesn't work on it. Okay, so it just allows you to loop over it without actually manipulating it. So you can only do, I didn't know this actually. I thought you were allowed to manipulate it. So actually, if you wanted to make a change over each one, what happens here is, so this will actually work. If I do this, it says butts is a decent language, meows is a decent language, friends is a decent language. But it only does it to the console. It actually doesn't make a change. But if I wanted to do something else, which is, let's say I create another array. So var r2 equals array, and then I do r2 dot push. Let's just do var new elements. Oh, let's just do element. Okay. Then let's do R2. There we go. So this would work. And so this is actually not ideal. And this is a good example of using the right function for what you want to do. So the only difference between the for each and the for loop is that the for each allows you to, instead of having to write the for loop, it'll automatically go over each element. But if you want to manipulate the existing array, it won't actually do that for you. And I thought it did. But I think what I was doing was getting confused with a couple of other methods. And I want you guys to check these other methods out. So there's array.map and there's array.filter. And these are both what are called higher order functions. And they actually will manipulate the arrays and allow you to do some interesting stuff with it. So check this out. Yeah. I was using this as filter. So this will actually, if I use filter here, I think it would actually filter and give me back only what I wanted. Okay, any other questions? We all good? Cool. All right. Well, I'll see you guys later. No class on Saturday. Yeah, that's true. Okay. Yeah. All right.
Thank you.
Have a good weekend. Take
You
care,
too.
everyone.